East Jerusalem or Eastern Jerusalem is the sector of Jerusalem that was not part of Israeli-held West Jerusalem at the end of the 1948–1949 Arab-Israeli War. Israeli and Palestinian definitions of it differ. The Palestinian official position is based on the 1949 Armistice Agreements, while the Israeli position is mainly based on the current municipality boundaries of Jerusalem, which resulted from a series of administrative enlargements decided by Israeli municipal authorities since the 1967 Six-Day War. Despite its name, East Jerusalem includes neighborhoods to the north, east and south of the Old City, and in the wider definition of the term even on all these sides of West Jerusalem. The term sometimes refers to the area which was incorporated into the municipality of Jerusalem after 1967, covering some 70 square kilometers, while sometimes it refers to the smaller area of the pre-1967 Jordanian-controlled part of the Jerusalem municipality, covering 6.4 square kilometers. During the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, Jerusalem was contested between Jordan and Israel, and on the cessation of hostilities, the two countries secretly negotiated a division of the city, with the eastern sector coming under Jordanian rule. This arrangement was formalized in the Rhodes Agreement in March 1949. A week after David Ben-Gurion presented his party's assertion that Jewish Jerusalem is an organic, inseparable part of the State of Israel. In December 1949, Jordan annexed East Jerusalem. These decisions were confirmed respectively in the Knesset in January 1950 and the Jordanian Parliament in April 1950. On being captured by Israel in the 1967 Six-Day War, East Jerusalem, with expanded borders, came under Israeli rule. It includes Jerusalem's Old City and some of the holiest sites of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, such as the Temple Mount, Western Wall, Al-Aqsa Mosque, Dome of the Rock and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. In the Palestine Liberation Organization's Palestinian Declaration of Independence of 1988, Jerusalem is stated to be the capital of the State of Palestine. In 2000, the Palestinian Authority passed a law proclaiming Jerusalem as such, and in 2002, this law was ratified by then-Chairman Yasser Arafat. Although Israel does not allow Palestinian government offices in East Jerusalem, in 1980, Israel unilaterally declared all of Jerusalem, both its eastern and western sectors, to be its undivided capital, while formally disavowing that its incorporation constituted annexation. East Jerusalem's status in international law, however, remains uncertain. The United Nations Security Council immediately dismissed the resolution of unification as a violation of international law, and the international community does not recognize Israel's Palestinian sovereignty there. 1948 Arab-Israeli War aftermath. Following the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, Jerusalem was divided into two parts. The western portion, populated primarily by Jews, came under Israeli rule, while the eastern portion, populated mainly by Muslim and Christian Palestinians, came under Jordanian rule. Arabs living in such western Jerusalem neighborhoods as Katamonim al-Arda fled or were in some cases forced out. The same fate befell Jews in the eastern areas, including the Old City and Silwan. The only eastern area of the city that remained in Israeli hands throughout the 19 years of Jordanian rule was Mount Scopus, where the Hebrew University is located, which formed an enclave during that period. Following the 1967 Six-Day War, the eastern part of Jerusalem came under Israeli rule, along with the entire West Bank. Shortly after the Israeli takeover, East Jerusalem was annexed to West Jerusalem, together with several neighboring West Bank villages. In November 1967, United Nations Security Council Resolution 242 was passed, calling for Israel to withdraw from territories occupied in the recent conflict, in exchange for peace treaties. In 1980, the Knesset passed the Jerusalem Law, which declared that Jerusalem, complete and united, is the capital of Israel, which is commonly called an active annexation, though no such formal measure was even taken. This declaration was determined to be null and void by United Nations Security Council Resolution 478. Political term. East Jerusalem is a term with heavy political implications. The term Arab Jerusalem is used by Arabs in official English language documents, emphasizing the Arabic-speaking Palestinian population and distinguishing it from the Hebrew-speaking parts of the city. Israelis call the Arab-populated part of the city East Jerusalem because of its location in the eastern part of the single larger Jerusalem city unit. The term East Jerusalem is ambiguous and may be used to refer to either of the following. From 1948 to 1967 it referred to the 6.4 square kilometers Jordanian-ruled part of the city, mainly the predominantly Arab business district, the Old City and surrounding neighborhoods, counterpart of West Jerusalem, which referred to the Israeli part of the city. It may be applied to the area that Israel annexed and included in municipal Jerusalem following its capture by Israel from Jordan in 1967, which lies northeast and south of the former East Jerusalem. This area includes an additional approximate 64 square kilometers of the West Bank, including territory which previously included 28 villages and areas of the Bethlehem and Beit Yala municipalities under Jordanian rule. History. Jordanian rule. Jerusalem was to be an international city under the 1947 UN partition plan. It was not included as a part of either the proposed Jewish or Arab states. During the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, the western part of Jerusalem was captured by Israel, while East Jerusalem was captured by Jordan. The war came to an end with the signing of the 1949 Armistice Agreements. Upon its capture, the Jordanians immediately expelled all the Jewish residents of the Jewish quarter. 58 synagogues were destroyed, the ancient Jewish cemetery on Mount of Olives was desecrated, and the tombstones that were used for construction and paving roads. Jordan also destroyed the Jewish villages of Ataro and Neve Yaakov just north of Jerusalem. East Jerusalem absorbed some of the refugees from West Jerusalem's Arab neighborhoods that came under Israeli rule. Thousands of Arab refugees who were displaced from their homes in Israeli-held West Jerusalem were settled in the previously Jewish areas of East Jerusalem. In 1950, East Jerusalem, along with the rest of the West Bank, was annexed by Jordan. Nevertheless, the annexation of the West Bank was recognized only by the United Kingdom, although the Israeli and Jordanian annexations of the two parts of Jerusalem were given only de facto recognition. During the period of Jordanian rule, East Jerusalem lost much of its importance, as it was no longer a capital, and losing its link to the coast diminished its role as a commercial hub. It even saw a population decrease, with merchants and administrators moving to Amman. On the other hand, it maintained its religious importance, as well as its role as a regional center. Reaffirming a 1953 statement, Jordan in 1960 declared Jerusalem its second capital. The USA protested this plan, and stated it could not recognize or associate itself in any way with actions which confer upon Jerusalem the attributes of a seat of government. Quote. During the 1960s, Jerusalem's economic improvement and its tourism industry developed significantly, and its holy sites attracted growing numbers of pilgrims, but Israelis of all religions were not allowed into East Jerusalem. The Kendall Town scheme was commissioned by the Jordanian government in 1966 to link East Jerusalem with the surrounding towns and villages, integrating them into a metropolitan area. This plan was not implemented, as East Jerusalem came under Israeli rule the following year. Israeli rule. During the Six-Day War of 1967, Israel captured the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and eventually incorporated Eastern Jerusalem and its surroundings into the municipality of Jerusalem, including several neighboring villages. This move, amounting to 111 square kilometers of West Bank territory, excluded many of East Jerusalem's suburbs and divided several villages. Under Israeli rule, members of all religions are largely granted access to the holy sites, with the Muslim Waqf maintaining control of the Temple Mount and the Muslim holy sites there. The old Moroccan quarter in front of the Western Wall was bulldozed 3 days after its capture, leading to the deaths of several residents in the forced resettlement of its 135 families. It was replaced with a large open-air plaza. The Jewish quarter, destroyed in 1948, was depopulated, rebuilt and resettled by Jews after 2000 with the stated purpose of preventing infiltration during the Second Intifada. Israel decided to surround Jerusalem's eastern perimeter with a security barrier. The structure has separated East Jerusalem neighborhoods from the West Bank suburbs, all of which are under the jurisdiction of Israel and the IDF. The planned route of the separation barrier has raised much criticism, with the Israeli Supreme Court ruling that certain sections of the barrier must be rerouted. The Oslo Accords prohibit the establishment of any activity of the Palestinian Authority in Jerusalem, under the pretext that they are part of the PA. Israel closed many Palestinian NGOs since 2001. In the 25th of January 2006 Palestinian legislative elections, 6,300 East Jerusalem Arabs were registered and permitted to vote locally. All other residents had to travel to West Bank polling stations. Hamas won 4 seats and Fatah 2, even though Hamas was barred by Israel from campaigning in the city. Fewer than 6,000 residents were permitted to vote locally in the prior 1996 elections. In March 2009, a confidential EU Heads of Mission report on East Jerusalem was published, in which the Israeli government was accused of actively pursuing the illegal annexation of East Jerusalem. The report stated, Israeli facts on the ground, including new settlements, construction of the barrier, discriminatory housing policies, house demolitions, restrictive permit regime and continued closure of Palestinian institutions, increased Jewish-Israeli presence in East Jerusalem, weaken the Palestinian community in the city, impede Palestinian urban development and separate East Jerusalem from the rest of the West Bank. A poll conducted by Palestinian Center for Public Opinion and American Pector Middle East polls for the Council on Foreign Relations among East Jerusalem Arab residents in 2011 revealed that 39% of East Jerusalem Arab residents would prefer Israeli citizenship, contrary to 31% who opted for Palestinian citizenship. According to the poll, 40% of Palestinian residents would prefer to leave the neighborhoods if they would be placed under Palestinian rule. Status. Sovereignty. East Jerusalem has been occupied by Israel since 1967 and has been effectively annexed, in an act internationally condemned, by Israel in 1980. On 27–28 June 1967, East Jerusalem was integrated to Jerusalem by extension of its municipal borders and was placed under the law, jurisdiction and administration of the State of Israel. In a unanimous General Assembly resolution, the UN declared the measures trying to change the status of the city invalid. In a reply to the resolution, Israel denied these measures constituted annexation, and contended that it merely wanted to deliver services to its inhabitants and protect the holy places. There are different opinions whether or not it is also annexed in 1967 or in 1980. Some maintain that the application of Israeli laws on East Jerusalem implies annexation. Israel, however, has never formally annexed East Jerusalem, or even claimed sovereignty over it, although the Israeli Supreme Court recognized that East Jerusalem had become an integral part of the State of Israel. It rejected in 1969 the argument that the imposition by Israel of its laws and administration on East Jerusalem was equivalent to annexation. According to lawyers, annexation of an area would automatically make its inhabitants Israeli citizens. This circumstance, however, did not hold true. They became permanent residents. However, the many refugees who fled during the war were not allowed by Israel to return to their homes. Some lawyers have argued that Israel has sovereignty over East Jerusalem under international law, since Jordan did not have legal sovereignty over the territory, and thus Israel was entitled in an act of self-defense during the Six-Day War to fill the vacuum. This interpretation is a minority position, and international law considers all the West Bank to be occupied territory and call for Palestinians in the occupied territories to be given self-determination. The international community regards East Jerusalem part of the Palestinian territories. The first Israeli president Weizmann, in 1948, claimed only Israeli sovereignty over West Jerusalem, not including the Old City. Until the 1967 war, Israel accepted Jordanian rule over East Jerusalem, including the Old City. But after the occupation, Israel extended its claims. In 1988, while rejecting Israeli sovereignty over East Jerusalem, Jordan renounced its territorial claims to the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. The PLO claims Palestinian sovereignty over East Jerusalem, but has shown willingness to negotiate over sharing with Israel sovereignty over the Old City, including Israeli sovereignty over the Western Wall. The PLO's current position is that East Jerusalem, as defined by the pre-1967 municipal boundaries, shall be the capital of Palestine and West Jerusalem the capital of Israel, with each state enjoying full sovereignty over its respective part of the city and with its own municipality. A joint Israeli-Palestinian Development Council would be responsible for coordinated development negotiations on Share or Divide. Both the Oslo Accords and the 2003 Road Map for Peace postponed the negotiations on the status of Jerusalem. Also during the last serious negotiations in 2008 with the Olmert government, Israel refused to talk about the Jerusalem question. Israeli leaders have frequently rejected, in various formulations, any possibility of negotiations questioning the status of East Jerusalem, which it is claimed to remain part of the eternal, united and indivisible capital of Israel, a vision also expressed in the Jerusalem Law. The 1997 Balfour Agreement between the Likud bloc and Labour postulated that all of Jerusalem would remain under Israeli sovereignty and the Palestinian entity would never have its governing center within Jerusalem. Israel's policy has been described as purportedly to obstruct negotiations by creating facts on the ground. Numerous UN resolutions have declared null and void actions by the occupying power that changed the status of Jerusalem. Examples of such actions are the imposition of Israeli laws upon East Jerusalem, the integration into the Jerusalem municipality, the barrier in Jerusalem, and an active settlement policy designed to cut off East Jerusalem from the rest of the West Bank. The only Israeli-Palestinian agreement ever, arranging equal share of sovereignty over Jerusalem, was the unofficial Beilan Abu Mazen Agreement of 1995, which never became reality. The Palestinians would have sovereignty over East Jerusalem, but not without legalization of the major Israeli settlements in and around Jerusalem and a guaranteed two-thirds Israeli majority. The Israeli proposals at the 2000 Camp David summit also envisaged inclusion of surrounding Israeli settlements, but not of Palestinian villages. There was not any more Palestinian sovereignty within the current municipality, but some autonomy instead. The old city would not become part of the capital of Palestine. As the Palestine Papers revealed, Ehud Olmert's offer in 2008 was quite similar to that of Ehud Barak in 2000, although Israel offered more compensation elsewhere. Again, with almost the same map as in 2000, the largely reduced Palestinian area was embedded in the surrounding settlements annexed by Israel. The Palestinians would have sovereignty over the Arab neighborhoods, while the question of sovereignty over the Haram al-Sharif was shifted to the future. The Palestinian Authority gave away almost all of the Jewish neighborhoods of East Jerusalem, but not Ma'ale-Adumim. The Israelis were still not satisfied. They wanted Inter Alia, also Ma'ale-Adumim, Har Homa, and the major aerial block, and control over the Palestinian water resources, the airspace and the Jordan Valley, including access routes. Jerusalem as capital. While both Israel and Palestine declared Jerusalem the capital, the Palestinians usually refer to East Jerusalem as the capital of the state of Palestine. This is consistent with the view of a shared Jerusalem, with West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and East Jerusalem within the pre-1967 municipal borders as the capital of Palestine. In 1980, the Knesset adopted the Jerusalem Law as a basic law, declaring Jerusalem, complete and united, the capital of Israel. The law applied to both West and East Jerusalem within, among others, the expanded boundaries as defined in June 1967. While the Jerusalem Law has political and symbolic importance, it added nothing to the legal or administrative circumstance of the city. Already on the 23rd of January 1950, the Knesset had proclaimed Jerusalem capital of Israel. It refrained, however, from explicitly including East Jerusalem, which was governed by Jordan at the time. In response to the Jerusalem Law, the United Nations Security Council unanimously adopted Resolution 478, declaring the law null and void and a violation of international law. The Israeli-Palestinian Declaration of Principles, signed the 13th of September 1993, deferred the settlement of the permanent status of Jerusalem to the final stages of negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians. The possibility of a Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem was considered by Israel for the first time in the Tabor summit in 2001. Although these negotiations ended without an agreement, and this possibility has not been considered by Israel since. To solve the oxymoron of a Palestinian capital in the eternal, united and indivisible capital of Israel, Israeli peace proposals pushed a mere symbolic capital, East Jerusalem. Jerusalem, confined to the outskirts of Jerusalem, outside the municipal borders, notably in Abu Dis. In such solution, Israel would keep primary sovereignty, while the Palestinians would get some form of self-rule in Arab neighborhoods. Indeed, in 1996, the Palestinians began building government offices and even a parliament in Abu Dis, being part of East Jerusalem. Then, Israel cut it off from Jerusalem by building the separation wall. In the end, East Jerusalem will be completely isolated from the West Bank by the wall and a long chain of Jewish settlements. United States position. In 1990, the United States Senate adopted a resolution acknowledging Jerusalem as Israel's capital and stating that it strongly believes that Jerusalem must remain an undivided city. Quote, in 1991, however, United States Secretary of State James Baker stated that the United States is opposed to the Israeli annexation of East Jerusalem and the extension of Israeli law on it and the extension of Jerusalem's municipal boundaries. Historically, the U.S. had viewed East Jerusalem as forming part of the West Bank, a territory under belligerent occupation. Nevertheless, the subsequent Clinton administration refused to characterize East Jerusalem as being under occupation and viewed it as a territory over which sovereignty was undefined. Vice President Al Gore stated that the U.S. viewed United Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. In light of this designation, the U.S. has since abstained from Security Council resolutions which use language which construes East Jerusalem as forming part of the West Bank. In 1995, Congress passed the Jerusalem Embassy Act, which declared that Jerusalem should remain undivided and that it should be recognized as Israel's capital. Residency. Following the 1967 war, Israel conducted a census in East Jerusalem and granted permanent Israeli residency to those Arab Jerusalemites present at the time of the census. Those not present lost the right to reside in Jerusalem. Jerusalem Palestinians are permitted to apply for Israeli citizenship, provided they meet the requirements for naturalization, such as swearing allegiance to Israel and renouncing all other citizenships, which most of them refused to do. At the end of 2005, 93% of the Arab population of East Jerusalem had permanent residency and 5% had Israeli citizenship. Between 2008 and 2010, approximately 4,500 Palestinians resident in East Jerusalem applied for Israeli citizenship, of which 1/3 were accepted, 1/3 rejected, and 1/3 had the decision postponed. As residents, East Jerusalemites without Israeli citizenship have the right to vote in municipal elections and play a role in the administration of the city. Residents pay taxes, and following a 1988 Israeli Supreme Court ruling, East Jerusalem residents are guaranteed the right to Social Security benefits and state health care. Until 1995, those who lived abroad for more than 7 years or obtained residency or citizenship in another country were deemed liable to lose the residency status. In 1995, Israel began revoking permanent residency status from former Arab residents of Jerusalem who could not prove that their center of life was still in Jerusalem. This policy was rescinded 4 years later. In March 2000, the Minister of the Interior, Nathan Sharansky, stated that the quiet deportation policy would cease. The prior policy would be restored, and Arab natives to Jerusalem would be able to regain residency if they could prove that they have visited Israel at least once every 3 years. Since December 1995, permanent residency of more than 3,000 individuals expired, leaving them with neither citizenship nor residency. Despite changes in policy under Sharansky, in 2006 the number of former Arab Jerusalemites to lose the residency residency status was 1,363, a six-fold increase on the year before.